Okay, next up is going to be Guardians Paltry Planet, book number 2, written by Aaron Osser. This is 296 pages. It is $4.99. It's available on Kindle Unlimited, and here's the author's description. After the invasion of the Academy and Sig's betrayal, Zundy and his crew head off towards Cointown, where they're supposed to meet a contact of the crime boss, Big Fish. Things in the Giantlands are never as they seem, and their careful plans are soon derailed. With the new crew member in tow, Zundy and company set out on a harrowing journey to clear their first section of the great journey towards the Green Sea. Massive guardians stand in the way. However, the first major test for any crew: does Zundy have what it takes to lead his crew to victory, or will he, like so many others, fail to make the cut and prematurely end his quest for the Viridian Core? Okay, I generally liked book number 1. I liked the beginning half of the book number 1 in particular. Had a really gritty tone. The main character was treated horribly, which made his eventual power progression very satisfying. And I mentioned in that review of book number 1 that the second half of the story lost my interest a little bit because it loses that tension. It loses that feeling of an underdog character as the main character goes into the larger world and sees how the views of his initial village are very different from the rest of this world, and how he's not as different, I guess, as everybody has even thought. And while that story continued to entertain, mostly because of the strong beginning and the action adventure that comes out later, book 2 continued that trend of kind of leaving that kind of gritty, harsh tone that I really enjoyed in the first book. It continues with the slice of life adventuring that's broken up with some fighting and dungeon crawling, essentially. And it completely lost that first section of the story that I really did enjoy. That gritty violence of a kid who, despite all the abuse heaped upon him, triumphed over the odds, makes his weakness into a great strength. I mean, in the story, in the book 2, the main character still fights and he upgrades his power structures and the adventure, but the tone is very much more casual. And the adventures in the story just weren't as entertaining for me. The main character is supposed to have this really long-term quest, and it's just that it's taking such a long time to even start it. He's supposed to be looking for the Viridian Core as this big, huge goal to show his village and raise his race up or whatever. And it just doesn't seem like he's ever going to get there. In the meantime, all the stuff in between that big goal of even starting that quest, and he's supposed to go through these different grows to kind of prove that he's ready for that larger adventure world. But these sections sometimes there's like these odd tangent adventures that don't necessarily have purpose. It feels very much like this pantsing slice of life story. It was like, oh, he's just gonna do some stuff. Sometimes he'll hang around. Sometimes he'll go on dungeon dives or get in adventures and fights. And he's still making progress through these challenges and these through the guardians to get to the sea to start that adventure and to have his crew. So there's progress, I suppose. But it all felt very casual and just wasn't again as gritty or in that tone of that first half of the original book. So for me, I found myself struggling to continue to care about the main character, to care about his quest, to care about the things that are happening. The action is still really nice. And that alone is probably going to be enough for some readers. If you enjoyed book number 1, you're probably, and the action is all you cared about, you might still like book number 2. For me, however, it wasn't enough to carry the story forward for me. So it was a near thing for me, but this just missed being entertaining for me. So it gets a score 6 out of 10 for me. That doesn't mean that it's a bad story. It just means, oh, this didn't work for me. You still might like it if you like these other aspects of the story. The game mechanics of the story where he's upgrading with tokens and stuff, that still continues. He still gets upgrades for all his abilities and powers and whatnot. It's just it's not as dramatic because of, again, he doesn't have that underdog tone anymore. He feels like, oh, very much like he's essentially accepted. So that part of his plot progression is kind of faded. And I'm like, oh, that was one of the big motivating factors for me. Like, oh, I wanted him to succeed because of that, and that's just kind of disappeared. So for me, just didn't quite work. So gets a score of 6 out of 10. That's Guardians Paltry Planet, book number 2, with a score of 6 out of 10.